What is going on, legendary human? Ryan Magic here, and in this video I'm going to be helping you forgive, helping you move through a situation that was obviously very traumatic for you, using the power of forgiveness. Now, I've said how to forgive the unforgivable. It's because we're going into the deepest stuff right now. Now, before we get into the video, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, click that button, keep yourself accountable to your journey of personal development. But let's crack in. The first thing that I want to pre-frame is that you're awesome for being here, because if you want to forgive someone, it's a damn admirable virtue. I just want to pre-frame and kick off by saying forgiveness is not for somebody else. It's displayed that way in society, but forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is for you, baby. And the reason why is because resentment or judgment is poison. Resentment, we'll just go resentment is poison. Is poison. Kind of like hoisin sauce, but poison sauce. Resentment is poisonous. It just sits in the body. It's like you're the one that's like losing out. It was interesting because I had a session with a coach of mine at one point, and at this point I wasn't really talking to my sister. I'd had a little bit of a falling out. She was like, the coach was like, I think you should go and talk to her. And I was like, I'm sick of helping her out, or something like that. And she was like, why did you assume that going and talking to her was for her benefit? I was talking about it for you. And it was like, it just clicked, and I was like, how could I be so arrogant to think that this was all about me being some savior for someone else? It wasn't. I was holding on to resentment, and I wasn't forgiving, and it was poison in my own body. And so because this is a pretty hardcore topic, I want to explain why most people will prevent themselves first and foremost from forgiving, so you understand where the poison, how the poison plays out. And then this magical thing is going to come underway, which is essentially the process, the ABC process of forgiveness, which is pretty cool. Let's go into this first and foremost. So the reason people won't forgive, for one of two reasons. But it's both personal to the person. So first and foremost, someone won't forgive because they don't want to express the vulnerable pain of the situation. They don't want to show the vulnerability of the pain. So I'm going to give an example. There's a relationship. One person did something that the other person didn't like, and it broke their heart, or it really shattered them. And the person continues to refer back to it. They hold on to that resentment, and they say things like, you did this thing and you did that thing. And they've got this kind of like wall up, and they're using it as a wall. What I want you guys to understand is that forgiveness is essentially the bringing down of a wall, but people won't forgive because there is a wall. There's, I'm going to call this the wall of resentment. Wall of resentment. Whoa. It's not written out very clearly, but that's the wall of resentment. There is pain on the other side of the wall, and that resentment acts as a block to that pain. It's a safety net. So because people don't want to experience that pain. Forgiveness is essentially, forgiveness brings that wall down. But what are the pain that people are trying to avoid? Well, if someone had been in a relationship and something really bad happened to them, and they put up this, oh, I'm never going to forgive you for this. There's some deep hurt under that. There's a deep pain on that other side of the resentment. And they're holding that poison in that resentment, but it's actually pain underneath. Now, if the forgiveness happens, I'm going to show how to forgive in a really wholehearted way that's going to be beneficial for everyone involved. But when forgiveness happens, then what's going to happen? Vulnerability, deep vulnerability. It's going to be a lot of tears. It's going to be how much, you don't understand how much that hurt me, how I felt like, I didn't matter and that I was worthless, and all of these deep vulnerabilities, these deep emotions that the traumatic incident created or sparked for that, let's just call him a victim in the situation, just to make it obvious that it was the victim and the perpetrator. So the victim is feeling all this pain, and it revealed all these things about them, these insecurities, and it's very difficult for them to want to go there. And that's understandable. But the second reason people don't want to forgive is because they don't want to admit their part. They don't want to admit their part to play. Now, both of these happen from insecurity. If someone doesn't want to show the vulnerability and the pain, it's because they think it's going to make them look silly, and they're scared that they're not safe, and they don't feel secure in their own body. Like, insecure is lack of security, lack of safety. So someone that can't express vulnerability if they don't feel safe in their own body. And so that's insecurity if they don't want to express that. And I understand, I know what it feels like. I've only, over the last few years, really started to give myself permission to express emotion at all because of how scary it was and how little I could keep myself safe and secure in my own body, how insecure I was. But this part is another reason that people won't forgive, because they don't want to admit their part to play because they're already feeling insecure about their spot in the relationship, or their spot, because the forgiveness is always going to happen in a relationship, whether it's romantic or friendship, but they're feeling already like they're not valuable enough or they're not good enough in the relationship. And they don't want to admit their part to play in the situation because they don't feel worthy anyway, right? And so this is like, it's their attempt to avoid it's the wall of resentment that's blocking from not just going to the pain, but it's blocking the fear of abandonment. Abandonment. Yeah? They don't want to admit their part to play because they don't want to... you know what? I'm just going to make this even like a third thing. Fear of abandonment. I'm just going to make it very obvious. This is huge. Fear of abandonment. If I forgive them and then I can't hold it against them, and then they might leave me, because that's the thing that's keeping them here. The fact that I'm going to guilt trip them to keep them, because there's an insecurity. All of these things all based on insecurity. Remember, forgiveness is for you. So let's go into this process now. Is this landing? Is this landing, guys? If it is, drop us a little like on this video. Help massage the YouTube algorithm in our favor here. We're in this together. But I really hope this is resonating. The unforgivable. And as I go through this process, this is going to just land some big bombs. Oh man, this is cool. In fact, no, I'm just going to go straight into it, because this is going to just be some gold in this, all right? So there's a three-step process of forgiveness. But the whole key around this, because you might want to forgive someone that raped you, right? Or you might want to forgive someone that raped you. You might want to get rid of the resentment that's causing poison in your body. There are some intense things that people may be harboring resentment around. So a really key to understanding this process is the difference between forgiveness and the difference between accountability. Two separate things. And we're going to go into this with this process now, but I want you to introduce you to the steps. There's three. The first one, remember, this is the ABCs. So first step is accountability. But I want you to understand there's two parts to play here in this situation. If something happened, there's always two parts. And to properly go through this process of forgiveness, to extract the poison from your body in its entirety, this whole process needs to be completed. So step number one is accountability. Now, from an accountability with them perspective, because there's a two-way, we'll get to the other part, this is what's important. Because forgiveness doesn't mean that you don't hold someone accountable. It doesn't mean like, oh, I forgive you, you can go out of jail, you just murdered my friend. No. If someone's done something wrong and it needs to be held to account, that's something that you can choose. But you can forgive someone, remove the poison from your body, and also hold someone to accountability. And that's a massive distinction in this whole video that I really want to land for you. So from a holding them accountable perspective, first and foremost, you need to define what happened, and then you need to decide if accountability is in order. Let's use an example. Let's say, for example, that you were in a relationship and someone cheated on you. The accountability could be leaving. Simple as that. You can still forgive someone and leave the relationship. But the forgiveness is what's going to be the thing that brings that wall down and extracts the poison. But first and foremost, the first step to being able to forgive, you can't forgive someone if there is a lingering gap of accountability that you know in your body. This is not about you have to hold someone accountable to something, because you don't have to. Maybe it's not appropriate. This is defining what happened, what the incident was about, and then deciding if accountability is in order, and therefore act if required. But there might not be even a space for this, okay? But it's just important to get objective with this. This is what happened. This, and this. So defining is just getting objective about the situation and then deciding if accountability is in order. There you go. This is a very important step. And this is what allows this to be much more possible. You also have a part to play in this, believe it or not. Because when it comes to forgiveness, judgment, and resentment, it's always a mirror. So I'm going to give you an example when it comes to judgment. If you judge someone for raising their voice, there's two things going on. There is a lack of permission for you giving yourself permission to raise your own voice, and there's a lack of acknowledgement that you do raise your own voice. Because you do. Everyone does at times. That's big. It's a mirror. So when you're judging someone else and it's triggering you, or it's frustrating you, or you're holding resentment towards it, it's because it's a mirror and there's things within yourself that you haven't accepted yet. That means you withhold permission and you fail to acknowledge times where you commit certain actions as well. This is big. This is Dr. John Demartini 101, and it's true. I didn't think it was true at the start, but it is. So from a you perspective, the first thing that I want you to do is take responsibility for your part to play. It might be a tiny thing. Why would I say this? Why would I put this step in? Let's say something, let's try to use the most exaggerated example. Someone gets raped. Terrible. You'd be like, why the hell would you want someone to admit any sense of fault in that situation? To claim their power back. That's why. Because if someone's not taking responsibility for their part to play, they're a complete victim and they don't have the ability to change things for the future. And it's also not a balanced perspective. Again, within this, there is no taking away from accountability. This is about cleansing the system. So if you don't take responsibility, it could be that was a very extreme example, and you're like, oh, well, I guess I shouldn't have just been out at night by myself without telling anyone where I was, or I guess I should have had some spray in my bag, whatever. It's not even really about that. It's more about flushing the emotions. And this is a part to play in having a full cleanse. The second thing is admitting how you have behaved similarly in the past or still currently do. So let's look at something like, and to be able to do this, by the way, this is a very mature activity. This is not just something that the average person could do. You have to be able to put aside the reactive insecurities that lunge out at stuff like this. We need to be like real grounded and mature and want a solution from this. Admitting to similar behavior. So you get cheated on. You're like, oh, I've never cheated on anyone else. Like if you're saying that, I'm taking that it's true. I haven't cheated on someone. But find evidence of times where you've done things similar. Have you ever energetically, even for a moment, flirted with someone? Have you fantasized in your head, is this the right person? Is this definitely the right person that I'm with? Have you ever had that thought? It's similar energy. And when you do that, it's going to help you get to the end of this process and have forgiveness, because you'll be able to understand that there's parts to play within this. It's going to come around full circle, but it's really important to do this step. I'll explain how it links into step 3 as we get there. So that's step number 1. The second step is setting of boundaries. This is massive. When it comes to setting boundaries, there's them and there's you. And it's not just the perpetrator of the situation. In this case, boundaries is like external boundaries, internal boundaries. Boundaries that you communicate to other people in the outside world, and there's boundaries that you have in your own behavior and what you do yourself. Now, first and foremost, you need to be able to define and you need to be able to, when it comes to setting boundaries for them, you need to choose whether you're going to, first and foremost, have any boundaries that would stop the incident repeating itself in the future. So for example, if somebody swore at you, you can go, okay, there's a boundary here that I have got to set, which is there is no swearing at me. And that's just a rule. After you've defined if there's an appropriate boundary that goes outside, then you need to communicate the boundary to anyone within the situation. You could have had something like a whole 5 work friends teasing you for like workplace bullying. You might need to communicate that boundary to the boss, to all the colleagues, and also like, it's just good to know what your boundaries are. Hey, this is the line. That's not okay. This is okay. And you choose that. Okay? That's massive. But this is about others. Because having a situation where someone treats you in a way that you don't want to be treated can actually be a really productive thing for the future, because you understand what is and isn't okay with you. And so defining if there's boundaries that need to be set to block something like this happening in the future, and then communicating it to others. What a lot of people don't understand about boundaries is that there's an external boundaries and then there's internal boundaries. So let's say, for example, you get your voice raised at the boundary. You can just be like, stop yelling at me. This is a boundary. Cool. You're telling them to change their behavior. They might still keep yelling. So where's your boundary? Your boundary might be, if anyone's behaving like X, Y, and Z, I take myself out of the room. Or if anyone behaves like X, Y, and Z, I leave the relationship. Because you could stay in a relationship with someone regularly crossing your boundaries. But if it's your boundary to say, I will not stay in a relationship with someone that does X, Y, and Z. That's a personal boundary. Does that make sense? So for example, in my last relationship, there were certain things that I set as boundaries that got crossed regularly. And I was like, you're crossing my boundaries, you're crossing my boundaries. I didn't have my own boundaries. I was just saying, this is a boundary that I'm setting you and telling you how to behave. And it's really important for me. It's a must. But then I didn't even have my own boundaries to remove myself from the room if that behavior was being done, or leave the relationship if it continued to be done. That was a lack of my own boundaries. So you need to be able to go, what personal boundaries? Boundaries. And you know what? I'm just going to clarify this further and just say, how do you respond to other people's behavior? Hey, how do you respond to other people's behavior? How do you respond? Is a way like when someone's crossing your boundary. Cool. This is important. So what we're doing here is we're essentially getting you ready for forgiveness, because it's going to be very, very difficult for you to emotionally let go of the situation when you feel completely at the mercy of it. You don't feel reconciled with it. How could I ever forgive this? Because the behaviors that hasn't been held accountable to, and you haven't set yourself up to feel safe for the future. But when you find your part to play, and you very clearly hold someone else to account, not to just for the purpose of trying to push everyone else down or avoid this pain. We don't want to use it as a mechanism to block healing. We want to use this as a mechanism to create healing. But these are material world things. The whole purpose of this is to have an energetic release, an emotional release, to free yourself internally, so you're not holding on to that poison. But to do that, you need to get fucking tangible here. Where are the boundaries where you're not holding yourself to feel safe from the way that this incident played out? And where have you struggled to hold people accountable? Now that we've done this, boom, synonym for forgiveness, compassion. Step number 3. So first and foremost, compassion for them. This helps a lot with that. Understand, but this is a choice. This is a choice. You need to choice to be ready, essentially. You need to choose that you're ready. It's a choice. You need to choose that you're ready. But there's 2 ways to forgive. This is massive. The first one is energetically. That's just choosing to, in your body, say, I'm not going to hold it against this person anymore. I understand it was something that served me. I understand that I do stuff similar. I've set boundaries for the future. I've gotten what I need from this, some kind of growth from it. And then choose to energetically forgive them. Because one thing that I got told a while ago that really hit home for me was the relationship that I have with the people in my life is more about how I treat them when I'm not with them versus when I'm with them. Think about them, talk about them to others. You get the gist? If you have a friend and you know this, there's always an energetic thing going on. Sometimes you go to catch up with people and you feel awkward. A lot of the time that's because the relationship you have with them when you're not with them isn't positive. You're thinking negative things about them, you're assuming things, other people are talking to you about things that they've done to them or stuff like this. So energetically forgiving them, this is going to be letting go of a huge amount of this situation. Second, and it's optional, is a verbal forgiveness. That's optional. It's just an option. You don't have to. Someone's done something really bad. This is more about getting the poison out of your body. You don't have to go to someone and say sorry to them in person. But energetically, to get rid of the poison, yeah, you do have to do that. And the second thing is, and this is where the real forgiveness, this is where the poison actually is going to release the body. This is the big part of this. You're going to forgive yourself for letting that happen, for letting this situation happen. You're going to forgive yourself, have compassion to yourself for this. And then you need to have compassion for the vulnerability to come. It's going to be a very vulnerable situation. But this vulnerability that comes is going to be you finally, you needing enough compassion, having enough compassion for yourself that you're okay with the pain that comes up, the vulnerability that comes up when you finally express the truth of what's going on and admit it to yourself, because you've let go of the tight grip, and then the emotion comes, and then the vulnerability and the pain will be felt, and it'll be a releasing pain. The forgiveness in general is a closing of a chapter. It's how it is energetically, the closing of a chapter. But within that closing, there will be emotions. Okay? When you leave a job, you might feel sad. When someone passes, you might feel sad. When you break up with someone, there's sadness, because it's grief, because it's the end of a chapter. So when you forgive, there's going to be emotion. You need to hold compassion and forgiveness for how you feel vulnerably and what you show vulnerably off the back end. But you also need to forgive yourself for the part that you had to play, the part you played in the situation that went down. Forgive yourself for maybe not being there all the time as a partner, and then she went off and did this, or he went off and did this. You know, and forgive yourself for any times you've behaved similarly, even if it's a small version of the same thing. Just forgive yourself. You're a human. Hold that compassion for yourself. And when you complete that whole cycle, what we have is fucking freedom, baby. Freedom energetically. Now, my question to you is, who do you need to forgive? It's always going to be you off the other side as the mirror for whoever comes to mind. It's always you as well, but who do you need to forgive? What's something that you haven't yet forgiven? And I promise you, every single piece of forgiveness that you go through, as long as you're still holding them to account, holding yourself to account as well, and you're setting boundaries so that things don't repeat in the future, the energetic poison that's living in your body deserves to come out for your own well-being. Who do you need to forgive? Who do you need to forgive? Now, if you found this video valuable, drop us a like. It'll help get it out there so more people can go through this process. And secondly, if you haven't clicked subscribe to the channel, make sure you click subscribe so you can keep yourself accountable to this journey of growth and personal development. Let's do this together. Now, I want to know, how did you find this video? How do you feel about forgiveness off the back end of understanding these two parts, realizing that forgiveness and accountability are two different things? Drop your thoughts. I'd love to check your comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.